Friendship isn't the big things, it's a million little things. Hello there, friends, and welcome to this, another episode of A Million Little TV Shows podcast. This is where we break down and discuss episodes of TV shows that you may not have even heard of. I believe these TV shows need a little more love, and that is what this platform is here to do. Each week we will be covering different shows from all over the globe. We'll be breaking down each episode, giving you the main highlights, and going through it bit by bit. But for now, I think it's best that we find out what's on the menu today. Hello there, and welcome back to this A Million Little TV Shows podcast. This is Season 8, Episode 2, and we are getting back inside number 9 in this episode. And I cannot wait, because it's been quite a while since I've watched Inside number 9. Obviously, we took a break last season, and I really want to get back into it. I'm really excited about these 3 episodes. I've just had a look at them, and I know what's coming up. Obviously, I've seen them multiple times now, but they're so good. And one of the standout performances, or at least one of the standout performers in it, is Diane Morgan, who, if you haven't seen Philomena Kunk, go out and look for things like Kunk on Life or Kunk on Earth, and it's very similar to a sort of David Attenborough style documentary where she's talking to camera a lot, talking about the history, then talking to experts, and it's done in such a comedy way that the experts you can see are visibly frustrated by her. I'm sure you'll have seen the clips online. She's viral everywhere. So I'm excited for that one, and I'm excited for the other 2 as well, because they're both great episodes. As for me, I know I made an announcement last week about a friend who had written a book. Well, another friend has written a book, and it's currently on Amazon Kindle Unlimited, I believe, and the book is called Marked by Desire. It released today, which is February the 14th today. Obviously this won't come out for another 3 weeks, but obviously when it does come out, that book will still be there. I will link that in my link tree as well. So go give it a read. I've read it and it's pretty explicit, but I think there's a good story there behind it. So hopefully you guys can go and give that a read. And I know that person has many books in the pipeline as well. Cassie Quinn tends to write from the heart, so I think that you'll enjoy it. Plus, I think supporting independent artists in the world that we currently live in is a great idea, because they are the ones that are struggling. Obviously, like I keep saying on this podcast, I'm hoping for either Patreon sponsors or adverts to come on this podcast. As much as I don't like the fact that adverts will be on here, at some point they're going to have to be, because it's just not sustainable otherwise. But I really do enjoy doing it, so it's kind of a toss-up. But anyway, enough about that. Today we're going back inside number 9, so let's get on with it. This is Inside number 9, Season 7, Episodes 1 to 3. Episode 1, Merrily Merrily. This episode stars Diane Morgan as Donna, Mark Gatiss as Callum, Shearsmith as Lawrence, and Pemberton as Darren. And all I'm going to say is what a fucking start. This episode is very, very shocking and really rough, but I think it's a good story, and I definitely think it needs telling. So Shearsmith's character Lawrence is at a dockside, and he's putting a pedalo on a lake. As he does, his friend Callum comes up and they reunite for the first time. And I mean, being a fan of League of Gentlemen, when you see Shearsmith and Gatiss and Pemberton all on screen together, it's a big thing. Like, those guys I grew up with, watching them on TV, doing their thing with the League of Gentlemen, and then things like Psychoville. And obviously, since then, Gatiss has gone on to do huge things, where the other 2 have done big things, but probably not as big as something like Sherlock. But they're all still performing and being excellent at their craft. But going back to them being back on screen again, so it seems like Callum's a bit of a big shot. He's been to university, he is a gynecologist, I believe, and he's quite successful in his field. Lawrence, however, there seems something off with him, but we're not sure at this point what it is. It's mentioned about a partner that he's got, and he says that partner is going to turn up later on. And then we get Darren. Darren is very much a working class kind of guy. Like, if you were going to rank these three, you'd probably say that Callum was the upper class guy, Lawrence was sort of the middle class guy, and then you've got Darren who turns up and he's a loudmouth, he's going in for hugs. He's using the air horn noise, for instance, like he's going off to a party. Just as they're about to board the pedalo, however, there's a spanner thrown in the works, because just round the corner comes Donna. She's Darren's new girlfriend, and he wanted to impress her by taking her out on a boat. He didn't realise that this was just going to be an afternoon on a pedalo out on a lake. Lawrence is obviously put out by this, and he just says, let's get going. They ride out, and everyone's being inappropriate, and they're just chatting and, the usual kind of thing. Catching up with old friends from school that you haven't seen in a long time. It's going to be awkward. It's a bit like a school reunion, but this one's been organised by, one of the friend group, and they haven't really seen each other in a long time. Like I've said, Callum's very successful in his career. Lawrence isn't as successful, but is fairly successful in the way that he is a teacher at the old university that they work at, which is revealed throughout. But Darren, who actually went to university to do sports science, dropped out in his second year and never actually completed, and has sort of just drifted on by since then. Donna encourages him to tell them what he's been up to lately, and when he does, he reveals that he is writing a book. But when Callum inquires further into what the book is about, and it seems a very simplistic sort of baby's first book, Darren gets pissed off, because it seems that he has had some issues in the past that have managed to catch up to him over time, and he's realised things about himself, in that he has a learning disability, and he's actually written this book not for children, as he first stated, or babies, but people like him, so that they can get to grips with reading and learning and everything like that. So he's actually done it for a morally conscious reason than just trying to make money for money's sake. It's actually going towards helping people like him. Eventually they end up running aground, and Lawrence feels that everything has been ruined by the fact that Donna is there. I may have called her Diane throughout this, but it's Donna. So when Darren and Callum actually ask where Lawrence's partner is, that she was meant to be coming on this trip and that where the hell is she, Lawrence reveals that she won't be coming, or that she's already here, in fact, in a way. Turns out that since university, that was all he had. He's lived his life with his partner from university up until this point, over 30 years by this point, until he sat in this boat, or pedalo. He tells them that he hasn't done anything much of note since then. He even teaches at the same university they went to, and he seems broken. He tells them that a year earlier his partner got ill and ended up dying from that illness. It was very quick. It was very sudden, and they weren't expecting it. And that they came out there tonight to honour her. They were trying to get to an island in the middle of this lake until they actually ran aground. Lawrence decides to swim for the shore, so he jumps out and he takes his bag with him that he's got, which has his partner's ashes in there, as well as some other things. He gets over to the shore and he sets up a little shrine to her, and eventually they find out why they were actually on the lake. It's because Lawrence wanted to have a fireworks display. He's found a company that would actually do fireworks from the ashes of a person called Ashes to Flashes, which is a fucking great name in all fairness, but it's obviously a bit morbid. And very similar to what happened with Ginny and Georgia, because Georgia got caught up at the end of season 1 and she'd created some fireworks from the remains of the person that she'd killed. Lawrence, however, sets up these fireworks and it is freezing cold out on the lake. He's obviously dove in, so he's soaking wet. When he gets to shore, he's still soaking and he curls up for the night. The other three decide what the hell's going on and are about to jump in to try and save him, to go and find him and go and see what's going on. The next morning, all we see is Lawrence on a boat with a man who, throughout the episode, has been plaguing Lawrence's waking moments. He's been standing around the lake, and Lawrence believes that he's just a fisherman. This fisherman, however, takes Lawrence to the shore. He tells him that his friends are okay and that they're already where they need to be. The fisherman asks Lawrence for payment by just holding out his hand. We never see the fisherman's face. And when Lawrence tells him that he doesn't have any money, he all of a sudden coughs up a coin. And it's then we hear a voice from behind Lawrence, a voice that's familiar to him, with surprise that Lawrence is there. And we can only assume it was his partner. It's such a good episode. So great. So emotionally moving, and everyone plays everything to a T. Diane Morgan is fucking hilarious in it. Her first words, I think, are... She comes out from behind a bush and says, "Has anybody got a dog leaf? Because I think I've stung my fanny." Is one of the best lines I've ever heard. But it's exactly like what Diane Morgan's comedy is like. She's very raw, she's very funny, she delivers lines perfectly, and she's just daft. And I appreciate it, and I fucking loved seeing her in this show. She deserves more and more acting roles because she's great. And again, like I said, seeing the three guys from League of Gentlemen back together just made it. I think this is possibly the last time they've been seen on screen together. I can't remember if Gatiss was in the last episodes, but it's special when you see them on screen together because they very rarely do it. You usually get maybe two, but you never get all three. So to have that was a special moment. And I remember watching this first time and seeing them all together and being like, oh, shit, that's them. They're all together. This is going to be amazing already. I can feel it. They've got such a good energy together, and yeah, I really appreciated this episode. I thought it was really fun. Episode 2, Mr. King. This episode stars Pemberton as Mr. Edwards, Shearsmith as Alan Curtis, and Annette Badland as Winnie. This is one of the more creepier episodes that I've ever watched, but it is very apt, especially after what's happened in the last couple of days. It's an interesting episode. So it takes place in a small school in Wales, and it seems that Mr. Curtis, Alan Curtis, has been moved to this district. We're unsure as to why, but it seems that he is also taking over from a teacher called Mr. King. At the start of the episode, we see that Mr. Curtis is quite strict, and especially when it comes to the students referencing their old teacher, Mr. King. He doesn't like the comparisons, and he wants to just get on with what they've been taught already. However, they aren't very forthcoming with any sort of lesson plans that Mr. King's had for them before, and he eventually asks if he can contact Mr. King to try and find out what the hell he was teaching. As time goes on, we can see that there is a little bit of tension between the class and Mr. Curtis. He starts teaching them about the environment because that's what he believes that they've been taught before, and that includes global warming. He tells them that it's going to be the one thing that is going to affect all of them at some point in their lives. They're all going to be affected by this. This is going to be the next big thing. And also that they really need to study up on this, including in their time at home. But the class don't take too kindly to this because Mr. King's never asked them to do work outside of the classroom. Throughout the episode, however, one of the other students, Kerry, takes it upon herself to make Mr. Curtis a cup of tea, which for me is a strange thing for a child to be doing for a teacher, but hey-ho, I'm not the headmaster. The headmaster, however, is Mr. Edwards, played by Pemberton, who is a very eccentric man at all times. However, Mr. Curtis has this cup of tea made for him by Kerry, and when it's presented to him, he finds a bunch of tadpoles floating on the surface. And he realises that these have been taken from the tank within the classroom and boiled up in the kettle and then served to him. He sends everyone else out on a break and sits down with Kerry. However, while sitting down with Kerry, and he tells her basically that she's done a bad thing and he tries to understand why she's done this thing. However, the next day, Mr. Edwards comes into the classroom and asks if he can have a word. He speaks with Miss Curtis and tells him that there's been a complaint against him and that he is deemed to have sexually harassed a child, i.e. Kerry. He tells Mr. Edwards exactly what happened, but Mr. Edwards says that Kerry has accused him of taking his penis out, and Kerry has done a drawing of said penis and that he will need to see him, as in he will need to see Mr. Curtis's penis. Didn't think I'd be saying penis so much at the start of season 8, but there you go. And so Mr. Curtis does as he's told, and he takes down his pants, and Mr. Edwards begins to take a really good look at it, including taking pictures, and then he leaves. At this point, Winnie, the cleaner, has already come in, and she has seen this all going on. Everyone claims that she's blind, but she's definitely seen it. She even mentions it later on. Eventually, the investigation comes to nothing. It's found that he hasn't obviously done anything inappropriate with Kerry, and it all goes back to being normal. However, throughout the episode, he keeps getting clues about this Mr. King and that maybe this was something that he had done to the children. He breaks into the school's filing cabinets and finds there is no record of this Mr. King at all. He calls Mr. Edwards and tries to find out the information for Mr. King, but Mr. Edwards isn't forthcoming with it. He tells him that there is a bad line that he's on right now and he can't actually hear what Mr. King is saying. Mr. King heads back to his classroom, and obviously throughout this episode I've ended up calling him Mr. King when it's Mr. Curtis. In there, he finds all his students. They tell him that they want to practice their assembly that they're going to be doing next week to make sure that everything runs smoothly, and that they want Mr. Curtis to sit down and watch. They give him his seat, and he sits down and he watches them do their performance. They reference people gluing themselves to Parliament buildings, and they also reference things like plastic straws, well, plastic cups, but obviously the fact that Donald Trump's just introduced plastic straws again, well, that's why I brought that up. But Mr. King feels quite disturbed by the performance, and when he tries to get up, he realises that he's actually been superglued to the chair. They tell him that he is part of the performance, but he doesn't know what to do now. Eventually they all turn round and they've got masks on, and now it seems to be some sort of ritual. Very sort of, it feels like Children of the Corn. Obviously it's a totally different vibe, but that is sort of the way this goes. Or maybe even Lord of the Flies. They start to dance around him, and just when you think that everything's going to go bad for him, Mr. Edwards walks in and you think now he's finally saved. He begins to talk to the children and tells them that they shouldn't be doing this right now because the assembly isn't for a few days now. However, Mr. Curtis obviously wants to report everything that's been going on at the school, especially this right now, and Mr. Edwards knows that they've got to do what they've got to do. They begin the initiation for what is sort of a harvest festival, and they take him outside. When he hopes for Winnie's intervention as well, it turns out that she's in on the deal as well. And not only is she in on the deal, but there has been several Mr. Kings in the past few years that have gone through this school that have all ended up in the same situation. And essentially, he is going back to the earth, much like we all do eventually. Now, this is creepy as fuck. This is a creepy fucking episode. It gives me the chills each time I watch it. I'm not the biggest fan of children anyway. If you've heard me talk about the baby, I'm not a massive fan of kids. I think they're weird and creepy. And especially when you've got a collective of them like this in a small village where they all sort of know each other and they're all sort of in on it. It is a horror movie. But it's got a good message. The world is on fire right now. We've all seen what's happened in California. We've all seen what's happened in Australia in previous years. Jesus Christ, there was fucking fire in Canada, of all places, recently. And I've been told by a friend of mine that, yeah, there is times that when Canada is able to be set on fire due to peat under the ice, and it does seem like a fairly regular occurrence for them, but for anyone who's watching from outside, it's a scary time. Like, we know there's been fires in California before, but nothing as bad as this. And all the experts are obviously telling us that things are bad, but we never listen to experts until the last minute, unfortunately. We were told to stay inside in around about October 2019. We didn't end up staying inside for another 6 months, and 2020 happened, and so did COVID. The experts weren't listened to. But yeah, I'm glad I didn't do this last season, because I would have missed out on a lot of craziness that's happened over the last 3 months. So this was such a good episode just due to the fact that the world is in a state right now. And like I said at the beginning of last episode, I hope things get better pretty soon, but the way things are going, it's not looking great at the minute. But also, like I said in the last episode, I'm just going to keep throwing myself into TV until hopefully the world sorts itself out. Yeah, burying my head in the sand isn't the best, but fuck it. Episode 3, 9 Lives Cat. This episode stars Pemberton as Ezra, Shearsmith as Barnabas, Sophie Okonedo as Katrina, Robin Weaver as Philippa, Siobhan Redmond as Matilda. So Katrina wakes up in the middle of the night and goes downstairs to her kitchen just after checking on her child. While she's there, she pours herself a bowl of Cocoa Pops and then puts vodka on it. It's here where a man appears behind her, Ezra. he starts talking to her about how she lives her life, and ever since she left the force and got thrown off the case, she's a shadow of her old self. Katrina tries to convince him that she's the same person that she was before. She takes him through to a wall where there are a bunch of pictures on there, and it's the usual thing that you see from the bad cop that's been taken off the case but is still investigating, and she's got a string wall and all that kind of stuff. After a while, though, Ezra feels that this isn't working anymore, and the next time we see Katrina, she seems to think that no time has passed. But for Ezra, it's been a fair while since he last saw her. She asks about the string wall, and it's been taken down. It's not there anymore. Katrina also seems to have a partner. This partner, Barnabas, comes in and tells her that whatever happened last night, it wasn't what she thinks. They didn't sleep together, and they seem to fall asleep just as friends. They also seem to be working on the same case and working towards looking for this missing boy. But obviously, as I've said, Katrina feels like there's been time jump. So she's missing out on a bunch of time, really, where she doesn't know where this boy has gone. But once again, Ezra cuts her off, and he just feels like this isn't working anymore, and then she disappears again. She wakes up once more, and she's in another timeline again. As we continue through the story, we realise that Katrina isn't actually real. We thought that Ezra was a part of her imagination. It turns out that she is a part of Ezra's. Ezra is a writer, and he's trying to write this Katrina character as Nine Lives Cat, someone who is a former police officer who subverted the rules and was constantly going rogue, trying to do things her own way, at her own speed, and damn the rules. She's one of those cops that you kind of see on TV that's always doing things off book. And Ezra tells her that she is his character. He created her, and she just has never been able to work. He'll take her out every now and again, and he will pick her up and try and dust her off again, but it just doesn't work. The whole character is just a cliche of all of the tropes when it comes to these kind of detectives. He also tells her that she won't sell in the market because it's an overdone trope. However, Barnabas at this point seems to be displaying some sort of mental acuity, some sort of difference, like an ADHD or an ADD, something along those lines. And it seems like publishers are more interested in that character than they are in the character of Katrina. And especially when he's got a name like Barnabas Ball. There's a selling factor there, and Ezra decides to start writing more books towards Barnabas than Katrina. He tries to fit Katrina in there somehow, but it just won't work. Eventually he gives up on Katrina altogether and just writes stories for Barnabas. And he's a success at that. His book starts selling out. It seems like he's going to be getting a series until one day when what happened with Katrina happens with Ezra. All of a sudden one night he was meant to be picking up his son, but he didn't manage to get out there. When his partner Philippa asks where her son is, they don't know. He's received a text from Philippa saying that she would be picking their son up, but she hasn't done that. So now the investigation is on to try and find their son. As time goes on and there's no word of this child, Matilda is introduced as a detective or an investigator. She ends up finding some teeth in the bathroom that are children's teeth, and she starts accusing Ezra of maybe murdering their child. However, Ezra tells her that it was an associate of his, and he's sort of describing Katrina, that it's who she was, and that maybe it was her who left the teeth, but obviously she is a fictional character. He also talks about Barnabas, but Matilda knows that Barnabas is fictional as well, and she thinks that Ezra is starting to lose it. That night, Ezra wakes up in a similar way to Katrina, and he goes downstairs and finds Matilda dead in a chair. He walks through to the kitchen and finds Katrina in there. It seems that somehow she has come to life and she is haunting him. She tells him that she's done this because he was throwing that character away. She reveals that she's killed Barnabas, and she tells him, "Is that how you want this to end? Or do you want it to end like this?" And she pulls Philippa out the shadows and kisses her. It's here that Ezra hears a call of no, no, no from the other room, and when he walks through, he finds Matilda, sat at a computer, typing away. It turns out that Matilda is the one who is the writer, and she is trying to write a story about Ezra, who is haunted by his own characters. But since she cannot find a way to end the book, she tells him that she's always been bad at endings, and that she just probably needs to let it stew for a little bit. she opens a bottom drawer, which has been significant throughout the episode, and drops Ezra's file into it as he protests, and she then closes the drawer. This episode mashes my brain. Even trying to describe it then, I've literally just watched the episode. I'm trying to describe it, and I'm trying to get through it as best as possible, because it's a fucking weird episode. And when I'm watching it, I'm going, nah, this is way too convoluted, this is way too confusing, this is stupid, I don't understand it, why is this not making any sense? And I get to the end and I'm still going, this doesn't make any sense, but it fucking does. It makes sense. It's a really clever concept, but you've got to really watch it hard. It's one of the more confusing episodes that I've ever watched of Inside Number 9. And there's been some, but this one fries my brain. But the acting in it's brilliant. The concept of it, the story of it is fucking excellent. And it's all round an amazing episode. The twists and the turns in it just constantly keep you on edge and constantly make you think, what is going on here? And it's one of those episodes where you look at your phone for a second and you are fucking done because you will not get what's going on. Really clever, really interesting episode. And how they keep coming up with shit like this is beyond me. Like I said, I think the last 2 episodes of the whole show were probably the worst I've ever seen, but that's because of the quality of the other episodes. They're so good at this. It's unreal. But the other thing that I found really interesting, just going back to what happened last season, is the fact that the person who plays Philippa, Robin Weaver, is actually in the TV show The Baby as one of the police officers. So I keep watching stuff. Like, I watched that show, The Baby, because of Michelle DeSwarth, who is a comedian. And when I actually watched this, I didn't realise that these two were linked until I saw Robin Weaver in it. And I always kind of find those links between the shows that I've watched or the shows that I'm going to watch at some point. And I always find it really interesting that I tend to end up following certain actors around when it comes to different shows. And I don't know, it's probably because of the way that I actually watch the shows. I watch a lot of British shows and a lot of American shows, and they tend to end up, if they don't have massive stars in them, they will tend to have people who are not so big but recognisable. For instance, in this episode, Sophie Okonedo is really talented. Like, I remember watching her when she was in Ace Ventura, the second one, When Nature Calls, nearly 25 years ago, and watching her again in this. And I know I've seen her in lots of other things. I think she was in Modern Love. In fact, she was alongside Tobias Menzies in that. So I end up following these people around. I end up watching these different shows with all these different people in it, and they all end up being connected somehow. It's like the Kevin Bacon effect. I know that, but yeah, it's. I always find it quite funny when I'm watching something and I go, oh shit, I've just watched something with them in it. So, but anyway, that's enough of me rambling. Fuck that. So, I'm done for today. It's such a pleasure getting back into Inside Number 9. I love it so much. And I think you can hear that when I watch the episodes, how much I'm into it. But as I say, I've got friends who've got books out. They will be linked in my link tree. Please go and purchase their books because I think they're excellent. And if you think I've got good taste in shows, maybe you think I've got good taste in books too. I mean, there's only one way to find out, isn't there? You can just go and read their book. They're very short books, but they're good. So go and enjoy them. But as for today, I'm done. We'll be back in 2 weeks with Inside Number 9. I'll be back next week talking about Clarice, and we'll continue from there. But as for today, thank you for listening. I hope you're all doing well out there in this crazy world we currently live in. But until next time, I will speak to you soon. Bye. And that is it for now, amigos. And yes, I am as angry as you are at me for that sentence, but I hope you enjoyed the show and had some fun along the way. It means a lot that you are listening and supporting me. This is an independent podcast after all, and doesn't get a lot of backing. So it's great to know that you're out there, you're listening, and if you want to come talk to me on any of the platforms I'm on, just come say hi. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter, and I'm even a little bit on TikTok. I don't post there much, but I'm on there. And you can also drop comments in the comment sections on any of the platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, wherever you get your podcast from. But as always, thank you for your time, and I will speak to you soon.